I finished the Led Zeppelin discography in February, and at the end of their discography, I was meant to do a big ranking video of all of their albums, kind of going back through the catalogue, seeing how opinions had changed, having heard every album in order, and I didn't end up doing it for some reason. I did get a Beatles ranking video out around the same time, and then I was starting up the Weezer series as well, so yeah, I kind of just got a bit lost with it, but we're changing that today. I'm going to be doing a tier list of every single Led Zeppelin album, only the studio full-length albums, no compilations like Coda or any live albums, just the 8 main studio releases that the band put out from Zeppelin I all the way up to In Through the Outdoor. Up first, we have Zeppelin I, the band's first full-length album, and I still think this album is pretty damn great. It really showed that immediately they were a fully formed, fully confident band straight out of the gate. Chemistry, performances, songwriting, everything was there right away, and they even showed a great ability on how to structure an album. I mean, Good Times, Bad Times, one of the most iconic album openers ever, and then you also have songs on here like Dazed and Confused, and even the closer, How Many More Times, which are some of the best songs in the band's entire catalogue, and they're landing on the first album. There are a little bit of growing pains here and there. I do think the pacing is a little bit awkward at certain points returning to it, and I also do still think that You Shook Me is one of the weakest songs in their early discography. But yeah, as is, I think this is a great album, and I would easily put it on the great tier. Led Zeppelin's discography is actually kind of funny to me because up until their final 2 albums, their discography has a very clear structure for me, where they will have one album where they try something out, one album where they perfect it. So Zeppelin I, they were obviously establishing themselves as a band. Zeppelin II was then perfecting that formula. The fact that this came out the same year as Zeppelin I as well is mind-boggling. How in the same year were they able to improve this much on something that was already great? Like, it just feels like they took all of the great stuff minus any of like the minor nitpicks I had about the first album, and they made the great stuff better guitar tones, way thicker sounding drums. I even think Robert Plant's vocals are a step up here. The pacing, the production, songwriting, everything is just top notch here, practically flawless. I think the only thing that holds this back from being like absolute top tier is just the fact that I'm not as crazy on Living, Loving, Maiden, Moby Dick as I am with the rest of the tracks on this album, but I still think they're really great and absolutely on par with the level of quality they were bringing on Zeppelin I, so it does not hold the album back too much in the slightest. I would easily chuck this album up in the classic tier. Zeppelin III is my least favourite of the self-titled Zeppelin albums, but I still really appreciate it for what it is. It sees the band kind of abandoning what they were doing on the first 2 albums and taking a massive step forward and experimenting with their sound, which is the best thing a band like Zeppelin could do in my opinion, especially after they had such a great start to their discography. I think that them just kind of trying to recreate the magic of the first 2 would have led to their sound getting very stale and repetitive for me. Don't get me wrong, it does still have its hard rock cuts on here, the most obvious example of which being Immigrant Song, one of the most iconic hard rock songs of all time. But the bulk of this album's runtime is actually dedicated to folk rock, which is so different from what they were doing on the first 2. Now, I do think the inclusion of the hard rock songs is this album's downfall a little bit because they do feel so wildly out of place. But I can't complain too much when the songs themselves are as good as they are. Now, hats off to Roy Harper, absolutely one of the worst closers in the Led Zeppelin discography. No idea why this album ends with that song. It sucks. This album is the band at their most creative up to this point, and I respect the hell out of it and still think it's a great release, just the weakest up to this point. Despite some minor flaws, I would still absolutely place Zeppelin III in the great tier. It's not a different day, I'm not wearing different clothes, shut the fuck up, I'm filming this on the exact same day. Zeppelin IV kind of feels like the culmination of everything that was going on in the past 3 Zeppelin albums. It takes the hard rock of the first 2, the folk rock of Zeppelin III, and then merges them together in something that is far more cohesive and far more expansive and grand than any of their previous albums. The grandeur, the stakes, the scope, everything feels like it's brought to an absolute boiling point in terms of the band's discography on this album, and the execution is perfect. The production somehow even takes a step up here than it did on Zeppelin II and Zeppelin III. Like, the sound of this album is fucking mind-bending considering it came out in the 70s. Everything is way more dense, there are way more layers being thrown on top of here, and it feels like the band are trying their best to make something that sounds like it could fill a whole stadium. Not to mention, you have multiple of the band's most iconic and mind-blowing songs on this album, with Rock and Roll, Stairway to Heaven, and When the Levee Breaks. It really feels like they nailed the storytelling aspect of the band here as well, especially with a song like Going to California, where it's just so gripping, it's so immersive, the imagery is so vivid. It just sees them at their most creative when it comes to lyrical concepts, and the execution, again, is just absolutely stunning. It's weird, going into an album like this, I knew I was gonna love it, but I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. This is easily my favorite Zeppelin, and well deserving of going in the God tier. Houses of the Holy sees Led Zeppelin taking a bit of a step back, if that makes sense. It's nowhere near as ambitious as Zeppelin IV, it's nowhere near as conceptual, it's nowhere near as grand. And overall, it feels like the band just trying to make a fun rock album again, if that makes sense. And you know what? For the most part, they succeeded. It still has the incredible flow of a Zeppelin album, it still has all of the charm, all of the wit, all of the incredible performances. But I think that the fact that this album is so unambitious coming right after Zeppelin IV does kind of make it feel like a bit of a regression to me. The songs, while fun and catchy, are nowhere near as memorable as they've been on any of the previous albums. I feel like the lyrical concepts aren't anywhere near as interesting either, and this album also holds what is easily the weakest Zeppelin song up to this point with The Crunch. The fact that that song exists is baffling to me. It is just such a out of place mess on this album. Why is it there? Yeah, this is a far cry from their most re-listenable or impressive album, but it's still a really fun one and a necessary part of their catalogue in my opinion. So while I'd still give it an 8 out of 10, which would technically class it as great, I'm going to put it in the good tier for now because I don't feel like it's quite on the same level as Zeppelin I or Zeppelin III for me. Here we go, now we're on to the big one. Double the ambition, double the scope, double the length. Does that equal double the quality? Kind of, yeah, this album's pretty incredible. This is the band at their most ambitious. Easily. This album is literally double the length of all of the previous ones. They essentially recorded 2 albums, slapped them both into one project, and were still able to create something this cohesive and immersive. I mean, one absolutely mind-bending ride. This has some of the band's best tracks full stop, like In My Time of Dying, Trampled Underfoot, and Down by the Seaside. I'm gonna get my minor flaws out of the way on this album. There are a few mixing issues on some of the earlier tracks in my opinion, and I do think the first half is a lot stronger than the second half, especially with the second half having Boogie with Stu, which is a song that I really still do not care for at all. But still, those minor setbacks are nothing in comparison to the highs that this album provides, which is literally everything else. This album just provides banger after banger after banger with endless replayable tracks like Custard Pie, Houses of the Holy, and the Wonton Song. Even down to its more ambitious moments like In the Light and 10 Years Gone, the album still feels so fun and carefree and loose. This really is the band just having an endless list of great ideas in their head and just listing them off one by one, track after track after track. It is ridiculous. So yeah, while I give this album the exact same score as Zeppelin II, I would put this one up in the God tier just because of how impressive it is that they were able to pull off this album as well as they did. Look, I don't know why this video has been split up into 3 recording sessions. It's actually a pretty short amount of recording overall, but it's ended up being split like this, so I don't know. I guess we're just gonna move on. We're on to the last 2 Zeppelin albums, starting with Presence is widely regarded by fans to be the start of the downfall of the band, and I unfortunately agree. Don't get me wrong, the album has a handful of amazing tracks like Nobody's Fault But Mine and Tea for No One, and even Achilles' Last Stand is my favourite Led Zeppelin song. But this is really where we start to see the creative well running a bit dry in my opinion. It feels like we're just rehashing a lot of ideas that have been on a lot of previous Zeppelin albums, but instead of progressing them like each consecutive album did, this feels like we're regressing these ideas for the most part. The production has a pretty noticeable step down on this album. The mixing in particular is very inconsistent across these songs. Some of them, like again Achilles' Last Stand for example, will have these massive, thick, luscious soundscapes that sound so incredibly filled out. Meanwhile, other tracks like Candy Rock Store are just super unbalanced, and it feels like every single instrument is fighting to to be at the front of the mix. The flow of this album is absolutely appalling as well. Oh my god, this is easily the weakest Zeppelin album in terms of track-to-track flow. The pacing just feels so stuttered and stagnant. The album never really feels like it's able to just move with any grace or consistency. Now, I do of course understand that the band were under a pretty unfortunate set of circumstances during the recording of this, particularly Robert Plant injuring himself and having to be in a wheelchair for the entirety of the recording. But I would still say this is a good album, which, in comparison to every other Zeppelin album, is a step down, but it's not like a complete dumpster fire or a complete fall from grace or anything like that. I still think this is a solid release, just not or anywhere near on the same level as their previous albums. For that reason, it goes at the bottom of the good tier. Here we are, In Through the Outdoor, the final official full-length album that the band would release in 1979, 10 years after their debut. And unfortunately, they ended with what is easily, not even close, their worst album. It feels like it has all of the problems that Presence had, with the really inconsistent, sloppy mixing, the atrocious pacing. But you add on top of that a lot of inner turmoil within the band, with basically everyone except Robert Plant not really giving a shit about this album, and you just get a very inconsistent mess. The best moments on the album don't really go that much above being good, and the worst moments on the album are absolutely terrible and easily Zeppelin's lowest. I mean, come on, Hot Dog is probably the worst song on any of their studio albums. That song is unforgivable ass. I don't think it's a bad album necessarily. The second half is a lot stronger than the first half, with Carousel Ambra, All My Love, and I'm Gonna Crawl definitely being a lot stronger than the first four songs. But man, those first four are rough. Even Fall in the Rain, which is such an iconic song with one of Bonham's best beats, has just these random switch-ups and odd directions that it takes that just ruin the song for me. I think the biggest thing I can give the album is that I'm Gonna Crawl is a very satisfying closing song for the band. It does feel like a really nice send-off to one of the greatest hard rock bands of all time, one of the best bands of the 70s. And I'm glad they were at least able to stick the landing in the very final moments of their last studio album. That made me appreciate this album a decent bit more. So yeah, while I can't say this was any shade of even being good, I can't say it was a bad album either, because those final three tracks were pretty solid. It goes in the meh tier for me, which isn't bad, but it's easily, by not even a slight close margin, the weakest album that the band put out. Now, I haven't listened to Coda, which is on the tier list I'm using here, but I'm not going to include it because it is not an official studio album, it's a compilation. And I feel like it would be a little bit unfair to put a compilation album up against actual proper, like, structured out studio front to back albums, so I'm not going to include it here, but maybe I'll listen to it at some point and make a video on it. I feel like that could be fun. And yeah, that was my Led Zeppelin tier list. Let me know how you would rank all of their albums down below in the comments. Check out all of my reactions to their albums. I have literally reactions to every single one of them up right now. They're all in a playlist that will be at the end card of this video, or you can find it on my channel as well. Let me know what other bands or artists you would like to see me rank in the future. I did one for the Beatles, I'd like to do one for Radiohead, gonna hopefully do one for Swans when their new album drops literally this Friday. And yeah, like and sub if you haven't. We are on our way to 3K. I will see you all whenever I next stream or upload. Bye bye.